All right, my painting friends. This session of Halloween Addicts Anonymous, we're going to be painting a Halloween butterfly. And so this is what he's going to look like, except he'll have a wire hanger and a bow probably when he gets done. And I didn't glue this guy together yet because I wanted to be able to point things out, okay? But it consists of a butterfly and a skull cut out and a piece of wire with a couple of black beads on it that you're going to glue back here to be his little antenna. Okay, so one of the first things you want to do is you want to give your skull a coat of sand gray, and once it's dry you want to give it a little sand and then apply the pattern for the eyes, nose, and mouth. And then on the butterfly itself, you want to paint the whole butterfly with turquoise blue. And again, give it a light sand and then apply the pattern. So we are going to do some base coating, and I'll go ahead and do that and then come back and point out the areas I base coated and what color I base coated them in. All right, I'm back. Did a little bit of base coating, and so the skull, you want to base in the eyes, the nose, and the mouth with lamp black. And on the butterfly, you're going to base in this top edge that's supposed to be like blood dripping. That's the creepiest as I get. With country red, this wide stripe on the edge of the large upper wings is burnt orange. Leaves are foliage green. The petals are purple cow. The centers are moon yellow. This little trim on the lower wings is with dragon fruit, and a little hint is I just took a little bit of sand gray. You can use sand gray or white or whatever. And for the first coat, I mixed the sand gray with the dragon fruit, and so that gave me a lighter color, but it also covered better. And then the second coat was strictly dragon fruit. Okay, so that'll help. You won't have to base coat so many times. The little pumpkins are burnt orange, and the stems are burnt umber. So we want to give this a quick little sand again. Okay, now let's find our directions and get to work. We're going to dry brush some highlighting. So get out your favorite brush to dry brush with. We're going to dry brush on this blue background just to break it up a little bit. So wherever you can get your brush into, that's where you want to dry brush some warm white. And as long as we're dry brushing warm white, we might as well go down in here, in the bottom, in the lower wings, and dry brush warm white there also. You can see I'm having to scrub to get that paint off the brush, and that's how you want it, because there's no water in the brush. Okay, and we'll go ahead and do this side of the lower wing. Yeah, and that's okay. All right, you can go ahead and wash that brush out. So now what I want to do is I want to take my 1/4" stripe stencil and I'm going to add some stripes to the lower wings, and those are going to be done with warm white. Shouldn't have washed that brush out, but it'll be okay. Right, and I'm going to clean this off the dragon fruit border, and let's go over here and do the other side. We're going to add some warm white stripes. Oops, got up a little high, but it'll be okay. I think we'll be just fine. Okay, so we have the stripes on the lower wings. We're going to take our punchinello, and I'm going to pick up some turquoise blue, warm white and turquoise blue. I just want a lighter value of turquoise blue. You don't have to get too light, but you do want a lighter value, but you don't want just plain white. You want a little bit of that blue in there. And I'm going to take a punchinello and I'm going to dry brush some spots on the upper wing. And as best you can, get it in there, in between the blood droplets. And I have to get a little bit down here. Okay, that's looking pretty good. I'll do a little bit here, and it's probably not even going to show, but it'll be okay. Don't want to leave any little spot unpainted. Alright, so let's go on the other side here. Yeah. Alright. Just want to add a little bit of interest to the background here. Okay, let's see. Let's bring a little bit of it down here. And a little bit of it in the middle here. All right. So now you can wash your stencil brush out, or whatever brush you use to do that. And we're going to get out some true blue, and we're going to float shading on these blue backgrounds. Well, actually, yeah, just on the upper wing, because we need to add some dots to the lower wing. So we'll do the shading first on the upper wing. True blue is pretty intense, so blend it out really well. But it's really a pretty color on the turquoise. So I'm going to go under the blood drops, and more than likely we'll come back and float under here again just to deepen it up after we get the highlighting and shading and stuff done on the blood droplets. So right now you're just going to tuck some of that true blue in around these blood droplets underneath them. All right. And I'm going to come down the side next to that orange border. Okay. And go ahead and finish that. We're going to come back and go around the flower and leaves also. I'm going to get up here, start going around my little blood droplets. I don't like calling them blood droplets. What can you call them? I don't know what you want to call them. They're blood. Okay. And I'll go down next to that orange border. Okay. All right, while I let those floats dry, I don't want to wipe them out when I'm going around this. I'm going to go ahead and take a liner brush and some warm white, and I'm going to paint some dots on this. And you could dot them, but then you have to wait for them to dry, and this way they just dry a whole lot faster. And they don't have to be perfect, obviously. If you have a stencil, you could stencil them on there. I probably have a stencil, I just didn't get it out. It's always good practice to paint circles. If you do it enough, you get really good at it. Not that I'm saying I'm really good at it, but I do it a lot. Because I hate to wait to let things dry. Okay. Almost have one side done. Let's put a little one over here. Part of one. Part of one. Okay. Don't make your dots too small, just because it will take a long time for you to paint them if you do them small. And I did thin down the paint a little bit. Okay. One wing done. I'll go ahead and paint the dots on the other wing and I'll be back. Alright, so I have my dots painted. I'm going to go back up here to the upper wing and float shading around the leaves and the flower with true blue, and that should give my dots time to dry. So, isn't this pretty on the turquoise? Alrighty. Getting there. Okay. And let's get the other one. the skull is going to cover this area, so that's why I just stopped at, I didn't come down next to the center and everything, because it's going to get covered up. If you want to just practice floating down there, you can. Okay. And now let's see, we can go to this bottom here. We're going to float. It's going to float all across the top edge of that lower wing. Down. Now you see why I wanted the dots in first. I'm going to go around the pumpkin stem. And the pumpkin. And let's go ahead and finish up this side. All right. Easy peasy. At least that's what we all say, right? One more little edge. Okay. He's looking cute already. So we are going to work on this orange edging. You're going to need some moon yellow. And we are going to dry brush some highlighting on that stripe, that border, with moon yellow. And a lot of this is going to get covered up, but some of it peeks through, and so we're going to go ahead and do this dry brushing on here. And as long as we are dry brushing moon yellow, let's go ahead and dry brush on these pumpkins. I'll get a little closer. So we're going to dry brush moon yellow on each of the 3 sections of each pumpkin. And this would be why I didn't have you paint in their faces, because it would have just, you would have had to repaint them anyway. Okay, I think that's good for now. So we want to get out some, oh, you know what? We don't want to get out. What we're going to do is we are going to float some highlighting on these pumpkins with moon yellow. Okay, so I'm going to start on the outside little rim, and yes, it's going to come on and be really bright and intense, but it will dry, it'll tone down as it dries. So just on the outside edge of each of those sections, you're going to float moon yellow. Okay. All right, we'll let that dry for a little while. And then we want to go back to this stripe here, and let's go ahead and float shading at the top underneath the drips. Let me back up. At the top underneath the drips, and in the bottom right here in the little pointy V area there, and we're going to do that with Cherry Merlot, one of the newer colors. So we're going to tuck some down in this little V area and walk the color out a little bit. And then I want to go under the blood drips. Okay. So I'll come to this other side. I'm going to go under the blood drips. If you get a little bit of this on the blood drips, it's okay. It'll be just fine. All right, and then just a little in this little V area here. And I'm going to walk out a little ways. Now, this stripe here has spots on it. Now you can put the pattern on, or you can just wing it. They're just spots. They don't have to be perfect. So don't stress about them. They're not circles per se, they're more ovals. But just think like a butterfly. You know, they have those spots on them. So just some big ones in the bigger areas. And they're more like ovals, okay? You might get a few circles in there. But lamp black, you're just going to paint this with lamp black. And it doesn't have to take all that long, okay? Because they don't have to be perfect. It's nature, okay? Just kind of visualize like a monarch or something, with the way they have black on their wings. Okay. Okay. See, it's really not taking all that long. You're going to get one that's going to go behind. You might get a couple that go behind the blood drips. Now this one's going to continue over on this side of the drip. In fact, I'll make it be really big. All right, so one side's done. Let's go ahead. I'll go ahead and do the other side and be back. All right, so the dots or spots don't match from side to side, and that's okay. If you want them to match, that's fine. Go right ahead. But anyway, what I want to do now is I want to take my liner brush and some thinned Cherry Merlot, and I am going to line a shadow next to each of those spots with a wash of Cherry Merlot. And this is something, you know, I do like on eyes and everything, so You might be familiar with it, but I'm just going to line a shadow around the outside edge of these dots. And it doesn't have to be neat and tidy, okay? You just want to line a little shadow. All right. So we're going to take our flat brush and we are going to float just a touch of turquoise blue into the inside edge of each of those spots. So just a side load float of turquoise blue, and you're just going to do some little like, I want to say like comma strokes on the inside. It's on the spot. Changes them quite a bit. All right, gives them a little dimension anyway. So again, on inside edge, opposite of where you lined that shading, but this is on the dot, not next to the dot or spot. Okay. So before our black dries out, let's thin down some lamp black, and we're going to add a little stripe to separate the blue from the orange. Keep it as thin as you can get it. Just need to finish that off. Try to keep it next to the stripe. All right, and now on these spots, we want to take our liner brush and some warm white and just line a little, or stroke, whatever you want to do, a little highlight of warm white, kind of in the lower inside edge. All right. That really gives some dimension. Some of the spots might be so small that you just get a little touch of warm white in there. These ones right at the end of the thing, at the end of the border. All right, doing good. Now our blood drips, we're gonna dry brush some highlighting on our blood drips with melon. So I'm gonna get out a little bit of melon and your favorite brush to dry brush with. And we are going to dry brush highlighting in those drips with melon. Try to get down into the drip. Oops, not too much paint there, but it'll be okay. See, that's why God gave you spit and fingers. Okay, so one side is done. Let's work on this side. Okay. So we're gonna, don't wash your brush out. Go ahead and just pick up a little warm white so you get a lighter value of melon. And you're going to dry brush just a little bit brighter highlight. And this is going to stay like in the very tips of the little drips. Okay, not so much up in here. Again, with too much. Thankfully, the skeleton goes over that. All right. And now we're going to get out that fluorescent paint, the fiery red Hot Shots. And we are going to float this fiery red Hot Shots into each of those drips. Okay, you don't need a whole lot of it. A bottle of fiery red Hot Shots should last you like forever. So just, you're going to just pop up the highlight in the tips of the drips. All right. Makes them look so cool. Just that little touch of that stuff just pops them out, makes them look so dimensional. All right. Oh, so cool. So we're going to let that dry. And remember I said we'd probably come back and float True Blue again under those drops? That's what we're going to do right now. While the fiery red dries, we'll deepen that shading underneath the drops. Just to raise them up off the wing a little bit more. Alrighty. All right, I think you can see a little bit of a difference there. As we always say, every little bit helps. Now, let's get on this other side. Okay. There we go. Right, what I need to do is I need to float some cherry merlot across the top edge of that blood drip line. So just a nice float of cherry merlot. Okay. And then what we need to do is add little warm white highlights. Liner brush, teeny tiny liner brush if you have it. And those highlights are going to go inside edge. So if you look at it, you want to stroke the highlight on the edge facing towards the center. It doesn't have to be a stroke, it can just be a little set down or whatever. Just want to pop some warm white highlights on these. All right. Oh, I know what I want to do. I want to take and float a little bit of cherry merlot, so side load float of cherry merlot, and just wherever the space in between the drips, you just want to touch a little bit of cherry merlot shading on those, and that just helps to give the illusion that it's a drip. Okay, so it kind of what do I want to say? I don't know. Makes the highlights pop a little more. It gives it more of the look of that. They're drips that are raised up above the I don't know what I'm trying to say. So just a little touch just gives them a little bit more dimension. All right. Moving right along, let's go to our leaves. Let's dry brush some highlighting on our leaves with Moon Yellow. You can just go through the whole center of the leaf. You don't have to separate sides. Okay. Alrighty. Then what I want to do is I want to float some highlighting in the tips of the leaves with moon yellow. And again, it's going to go on bright, but it will tone down. But you just want to fill up the tip. Not fill it up, but float on the tip of each leaf. Okay. This looks pretty good. Let's get the other side done. Alrighty. So while we let those floats dry, we can go ahead to our flower petals. I'm going to float a warm white highlight across the top edge of each petal. Okay? I'm pretending like I can hear you say, okay. All right, one down, one to go. Okay, we'll let that dry and we'll go back to our leaves, and we need Hauser Dark Green. We're going to float some shading and line the center vein lines. So we're going to float this shading in the bottom or at the base of each leaf, and also wherever a leaf is on top of another leaf, you want to separate them. Okay, so like this leaf is on top, and you can make whatever leaf you want to be on top. It doesn't, whatever floats your boat. Is that an old saying? That's what my dad used to say years and years and years ago. Let's get this side. Okay. You notice I use my mop brush just to soften those floats a little bit. Okay. Let's see. So we can go ahead and line the center vein lines with Hauser dark green also. Keep them nice and thin. Okay. Let's see. All right. And now the leaves also have, you're going to take your liner brush and foliage green, and you're going to lighten up foliage green with a little bit of moon yellow. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to just add like a little detail line to each leaf. I'm going to start off kind of like a comma stroke and then just bring it down that one side. And just kind of cuties them up a little bit. Is cutie a word? It is a word, but not as a verb, I don't think. And then you can go ahead and just a line. You don't have to add any comma stroke on the opposite side. Let me get my other side done. Okay, so the other side we do the same way. Just kind of like a curlicue at the top of each leaf, and then just line the other side. No curlicue. Okay. All right, now one more thing we need to do to these leaves is we are going to float shading at the base of the leaves next to the flower petals. We're going to do that with burnt umber, very well blended out. All right, you don't want it to be a brown burnt umber line. You want it to be a nice soft tint of burnt umber at the base of those leaves. And that just kind of sticks them behind the flower a little bit more. So see, it's not a lot of color, just a little bit. So just next to the flower. Okay. We're going to call the leaves done. So our flower petals, we want to float some color on these guys, and the first color we're going to float is dragon fruit. And that's going to go at the base of each petal. And you're going to walk it about halfway up the petal, right? And it's a float, again, very well blended out. So I'm just going to float some color on each individual petal, okay? Kind of come up the side a little bit and then across the base and back up, and you want to kind of walk this color up through the petal a little bit, about halfway, just to add some more. We need to get some of the pink, the dragon fruit, from down here up into the other parts of the project, of the creation, so that this was a good way to do it. And it makes kind of a cool color for the flowers. Okay. Now we're going to let that dry. So while we do that, let's get out just a touch of Country Red, and we will do our first shade on our pumpkins. And if you painted with me before, you know this is how I always do my pumpkins. My first shade is always with a red. And this shade is going to go right next to the center section of the pumpkin. All right. And it's going to go on the side sections next to the center section of the pumpkin. It's going to go across the bottom of the pumpkin. Okay. And then it's also going to go in the top of each section. And yes, it's going to go over a highlight you did, but it'll be okay. So you're just going to go across the top of each section. All right, so we're going to let those dry, and we're going to go back to our flower. And what we need to do now is we need to float shading at the base of each flower, and we're going to do that base of each flower petal, and we're going to do that with dioxazine purple. Right? And now when you float this shading, you get a little closer here. What I want you to do is you're going to float, but you're also going to stop and kind of drag a little bit of the color in little, I want to say, like, it reminds me of gathers. You're just going to pull that color out a little bit. It doesn't have to be real noticeable, but just a little bit. It's not just a straight flat float. You stop and kind of drag the color up a little bit. And thankfully there are only 4 petals on each flower, so there's not a lot to do there. I probably could have blended that out a little better. But we're just gonna work with it. So just kind of take the chisel edge and drag some of that purple up the petal a little bit. All right. And now what we want to do is we want to take a liner brush, and we're going to take dioxazine purple, and we're going to line the detail on the petals. And what that is you're going to line to separate petals from each other, and then as you come across the top, you're going to flatten and then come back up to the tip. And this liner brush is not working very well for me, so I might get a new one. Let's see. Let's try a different one. This one's a little bigger, but I don't think it'll matter. So I'm going to come up to separate the petal. When I turn around across the top of the petal, I'm going to flatten my brush out just to give it like a curl. So just really easy, outline and flatten, come back up to the tip, and we'll get that little thing out of there. This last one, you probably want to come at it from the other way, or maybe not. Okay, so those had a little bit too much water in them, but they'll dry, it'll be fine. So here we go again. Up the side, around the top, flatten, come back up onto the tip. Okay, up the side, around the top, flatten, back to the tip. Up the side, flatten, and back to the tip. And on this last one. Okay. And now there are also some little hash marks that are on the petals. Just 2 or 3 on each petal. And that's with Diox Purple too. Then liner brush and Diox Purple. Just add some little detail hash marks. Just to give the petals a little bit more interest even. I said 2 or 3 and I'm putting 4 on each, so there we go. All right. So what we can do now is we can get out a brush we like to stipple with, and we can pick up some moon yellow on our brush, and then pick up some warm white. And we're just going to stipple highlighting on these centers. And you want to kind of go out past the edge of the circle. Okay. And let's pick up a little more warm white. All right. Easy peasy, just stipple in that center. Make it a little fuzzy at the base of the petals. All right. So we need to let the centers dry. We have a couple of more things to do to them. So let's, before we do any more shading on our little pumpkins, let's go ahead and put their faces on. The pattern for them anyway. So just need to put those little triangles on there. Okay. So let's go ahead and float shading again. Everywhere we floated shading before with Country Red, we're going to float it again with Burnt Umber. So I did on the outer sections next to the center section. I'm going to go across the bottom. And then I'm also going to go in the tops of each section with this burnt umber. Okay, looking pretty good. So let's go ahead and base in his facial features with Lamp Black. So I'll probably paint those in and come back. All right, I've got faces on my little pumpkins. What I want to come back and do is with Lamp Black also is I want to just take my brush and add little dots. And you can do this with your stylus if you want. If you don't like doing it with a brush. But I'm just going to add little dots of Lamp Black around the centers on the flowers. Okay. No rhyme or reason, just add some random little black dots around this centers on these flowers. All right, so try to keep your hands out of those. And what we're going to do is we are going to float a C-stroke of turquoise blue in the bottom of each eye. So it's just a little C stroke of turquoise blue in each eye. Oh, my pumpkins have blue eyes, I think. I don't remember ever making them have any other color blue. All right. And then what we're going to do is you're going to paint the pupil with lamp black. And I know you say that's kind of odd because the background's black, but it'll be okay. So the pupils are just little ovals. Okay? They're not dots, they're ovals. And you really can see them, especially after we get the highlight in the top of them. Right. We are going to, let's go ahead and float a little bit of burnt umber along the lower edge of the flower centers. Okay? So, nothing too special. And now we'll take a liner brush and some thinned burnt umber and line a shadow above each eye. I didn't line it above the nose. So just a little bit of a burnt umber shadow above each eye to make them kind of sink into the pumpkin a little bit. So each pupil gets a little warm white highlight. You can just do that with your liner brush and just goes in the top of each pupil. And then we're going to dry brush a little highlighting in the nose with warm white. And as long as we're dry brushing warm white, we'll go ahead and dry brush highlighting on that pink edge too. So first a little bit in the nose, and then you can go ahead and dry brush warm white onto this pink stripe or border.
All right, so the next thing we want to do is we want to take our liner brush and some moon yellow, and we want to go ahead and stroke a little highlight inside the nose. The next thing we want to do is we want to float some cherry merlot shading on that pink stripe that's along the edge of the lower wings. We want to float that up under the top wing. And again, you want to walk that color down a little bit. And we'll do that on both sides. And even though this is going to get covered up by the skull, go ahead and touch a little bit in the points where the stripe meets in the middle. Just a little bit of cherry merlot shading. You also want to float some cherry merlot on the inside edge of that stripe. So all the way around the inside edge of that stripe under the pumpkins. And that's just going to give it a little bit more dimension too. The next thing we want to do is we want to add some little stripes to this pink border. And I'm going to start the stripes right underneath his nose. And I'm going to use a number 4 flat. You could use a round brush or a liner brush, but the number 4 flat is a nice size for this. We're going to put those stripes on with foliage green. So I'll probably fast forward through this and catch you when we do the highlighting. Now, using the same brush, the 4 flat, pick up some moon yellow, and what you're going to do is you're just going to stroke that moon yellow on the outside edge of each of those green stripes to add a highlight to them, and that just helps them to pop a little bit more. You can notice them a little bit more. And so all the way around, each little stripe is going to get a little highlight of moon yellow on the outside edge. All right, so we can set this little butterfly aside because we need to get to work on our little skull. So just put this in a safe place and get your skull out. All right, our skull was painted in sand gray and our facial features were lamp black, so I wanted to give them a little bit of a sand so it would be a smooth painting surface. And one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to take our flat brush and some purple cow, and we are going to float those little C-stroke scallops around the bottom half of each of the eyes. And yes, you're going to get a little bit of purple cow on the black part of the eye, but that'll be okay. You can clean it up really easily by rebasing that little edge with lamp black. But just add your little C-stroke floats to form the scallops around the bottom half of each eye. So as you can see, I did get a bit of purple cow inside my eye, but that's no big deal. I'm just going to take a little lamp black and I'm just going to clean that up a little bit. We're going to dry brush some warm white highlights. It's going to go inside each eye, in top of the nose, and it's going to go basically all over the skull, wherever you can fit your brush and dry brush warm white. You want to do that. We'll start with his head, forehead, and we're going to go down the sides of his face. And you may think it doesn't show up much, but it really does, and it will show more when we get our shading on there. So let's go along and do the other side of his head. And if you want to dry brush it a couple times just to make it a little lighter, you can do that. We also want to dry brush along the bottom of his chin and his lower jaw and get up into his teeth too. So scrub that warm white up into those little teeth he has and across the bottom of his chin. And that's going to help the teeth stand out a little bit more. It actually just helps give him a little dimension too. And so then we want to come back and do the upper jaw, which be under his nose, and we're going to go down inside the teeth in his upper jaw also. Still dry brushing with warm white. That got a little bright, but it'll be just fine. No worries there. All right, and now you want to go and scrub that little bit of warm white inside the top of the eyes and the top of the nose. You want to put out a little slate gray on your palette so we can float some shading on our skull. We're going to do this. We're going to start like at the top of his head and come down the sides of his face. Slate gray works really well on this sand gray. I really like it on here. So down around the side of his head, we're going to go down the top of his jaw, and then down the bottom jaw and across the bottom of his chin. And then you're going to flip and do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to float across the bottom of his chin and up the sides of his upper and lower jaw. And then I'm going to finish it off with a float around the side of his head and meet back up on the top. And that's always slate gray. There are a couple of little places I want to add another little float, and that's where the oval of his head kind of meets his jawline. So I want to take and float a little bit of slate gray under his head just to set it on top of his jaw. All right? And I'm noticing right now that I forgot to paint the crack in his head, so I'm going to go ahead and do that with a little bit of lamp black. All right, so what we want to do now is we want to bring some of the turquoise blue that's on the butterfly, and we want to bring some more of that onto the skull. So I'm going to do a very well blended out float of turquoise blue on the left side of the skull. So I'm going to start probably by the crack in his head and float down the left side of his face and his upper and lower jaw. He needs some nice little cheeks because every skull I've ever seen has nice rosy cheeks. So I'm going to dry brush some dragon fruit cheeks on him. They're going to go basically under his eyes next to his nose. So just some nice round dragon fruit cheeks. I think adding cheeks to the skull makes him look just a little bit friendlier. I'm not about scary Halloween, so everything's got to be cute and friendly. So some nice pink cheeks, and that'll fill the bill. So what we're going to do next is we need to add that little edge that's inside his eye there, and that's done with a float of slate gray. So all we do is you corner load and blend just like a regular float of slate gray, but the color is going to be towards the inside of the eye. It's going to be on the eye with the color towards the inside of the eye. And you just float on that little edge there. And that just kind of gives his eyes a little bit more dimension and a little bit more character. So we're going to do that to both eyes, and we're also going to go ahead and do it on the left side of the nose. So just remember to keep the color edge of the brush to the inside of the eye or the nose. Okay? So that just adds a nice little touch to his nose. What we want to do now is brighten up the tips of his teeth. So we're going to do that with some quick floats of warm white. So just along the edge of each tooth, top and bottom, you're going to highlight that with warm white. And you can see it makes a real difference. It makes those pop a little bit more. Every little bit helps, all these little details. So just a little quick float of warm white across the top of his teeth. Let's work on his eyes. What we need to do is paint his iris in with a liner brush and some foliage green. And they're nice round circles. Don't make them too small because we need to put a pupil in there too. So here again, you get to practice your painting circles with your liner brush. It's a good thing you had all that practice on those lower wings earlier. So nice and round foliage green irises. If you wanted to make your iris a different color, you could, but I stuck with green. And of course, one iris is always bigger than the other. It's just how I do things. I don't know why. I can tell you to start off smaller than you want because for some reason circles always tend to get larger. So then we want to go ahead and dry that real quick. And if you have a handy dandy heat dry it gun, craft gun, that'll work really slick. A hairdryer does the job too, it's just noisier. So now what we want to do is we want to float some turquoise blue, like a turquoise blue sea stroke, underneath each of those irises. So just like we did in the pumpkins, we're just going to float a little bit of turquoise blue, and that's going to go right underneath. It's kind of like it has a second iris, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, so that looks good. And now the next thing we want to do is we want to get out some lamp black, and we want to give him a couple little pupils with lamp black. Don't make them too big. You don't want him to look like he's loaded, but big enough that you can see him. All right, and they go right smack dab in the center of each of those green irises. And then what we need to do is we need to add a warm white highlight to the pupil and the iris. And it goes, kind of straddles the iris and the pupil. So it's a little diagonal set down right on the edge of the pupil and the iris. And that wakes up his eyes really well. All right, so we need to add just a little bit of that Dia de los Muertos look to this guy some more. We did this purple scallops, so now what we want to do is we want to add the strokes on his forehead. So initially the first stroke I'm going to do is going to be one of those straight teardrop ones, and that's going to be with dragon fruit. So just a quick little stroke of dragon fruit between his eyes. And then the strokes that are on either side of this center stroke are done with foliage green. And they're little regular comma strokes. They have that little curve to them, okay? So another stroke of foliage green on the right side. Next up, we want to add some little descending dots on either side of those strokes. I'm going to do that with turquoise blue, and I am going to go ahead and use the back end of a brush to dot those. So just 3 little dots of turquoise blue that are on either side of the green strokes. So just be careful to keep your hands out of that. The next thing we want to do is we want to overstroke the green and pink strokes that we put on his forehead. We're going to do that with warm white on the dragon fruit one. And then on the green ones, we're going to overstroke those with moon yellow. We want to add a few little lamp black dots, and those are going to go at the base of each of those strokes on his forehead, and then also on each of the little blue dots. So you may have to wait a little bit for the dots to dry, or you can get out your dryer and dry them real quick enough to put little dots. But each of those little blue dots gets a teeny tiny little black dot inside of it. Alrighty, so this little skull is going to be done. So the next thing we want to do is we want to grab our butterfly plaque, and we're going to go ahead and glue our skull in place on the butterfly plaque. And then you can go ahead and varnish it with a couple of coats of your favorite varnish. I like to use a spray varnish and get it nice and shiny. So I like to use Aleene's glue, tacky glue. It sticks really well and it dries really fast. So I'm going to scrub a little bit of that on the back of the skull and glue my skull in place. There you go. So he looks really cute and he matches the butterfly, the painting on the butterfly really well. We were able to bring in all those colors and just make them marry the skull to the butterfly really well. So the next thing you want to do is you want to get out some wire. I use rusty wire, but you can use any wire that you want. All right, you want to cut that wire about 6 to 8 inches long. And then what you're going to do is you're going to kind of fold it in half and kind of pinch it at the fold at the middle. And then what we're going to do is we are going to add some beads. So I got a couple of little black beads, well, they're 16 millimeters, and I'm just going to slide them onto the ends of the wire and then twist the wire around the bead to kind of hold it in place. And I struggle a little bit here. I don't know why, but for some reason it was fighting me today. But anyway, you get the gist. We just want to wrap that wire around those beads a little bit so that they don't slide down the antenna. That wouldn't be good. Hopefully bead number 2 will be a little more cooperative, but there are no guarantees in decorative painting, right? So let's just twist that wire around that bead a little bit to hold it in place. And again, nope. Bead number 2 wants to be just as much of a pain as bead number 1. All right, so now we have our antenna. So what we want to do is we want to glue that right behind the skull and make his little antenna. So here we go. We got our little Halloween butterfly all done. I think he looks pretty cute, if I say so myself. I'll just add a wire hanger, maybe a bow, and he will be complete. So thank you so much for joining me again for Halloween Addicts Anonymous. I hope I get to see you next month when we'll be painting another fabulous Halloween piece.